So I go on with my introduction. As you know, Toomas Hendrik Ilves is President of Estonia, and also one of the few in Estonian political establishments who really likes to think about future and has really asked everyone to do the same. So trying to compensate a little bit this lack of strategic foresight which has been complained about today for several times. You might know that as a background he has been, before becoming politician and President of Estonia, has been a journalist and political analyst for some time, so being in some way colleague to his Dialoog partner today, Edward Lucas. And Edward Lucas is one of the biggest friends Estonia has outside of its borders. You might know that he is being based in London and working as a journalist and columnist for Economist today, has been also working in Baltic states, in Russia, so he knows Estonia pretty well. But it's also important to notice that Estonia is one of the 22 countries Edward is covering, so he wanted me to stress that he really doesn't know everything, although we might like to believe this. But our discussion is meant to be focusing to the future of Estonia. What happens after Euro? Toomas Hendrik Ilves is among them who has mentioned that Euro is just one of the milestones on our way to some end, and it's important to think what end it is, what Estonia should look like in 2018, for example, on the 100th anniversary of our republic. So I would like to now give soon floor to you. What do you think? Estonia has been perceived from outside as a brave new nation, as a Baltic tiger, and now during this recession time, the perception has changed. And both Estonians who believe that we are the bravest and the smartest have now discovered that perhaps it's not the case, and the former enthusiastic attitude has been replaced by a depressive view. So probably there is some truth in both of these views. And if we think about a human being, if human being wants to be successful, wants to be a high flyer, then in a way to overestimate himself is a little bit useful. So how is it with the country? Is it better for a nation to think in very good terms, or is it better to be very realistic? What do you think?
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and I think I can tell you that Estonia is the only country in Eastern Europe, and possibly the only country in Europe, where a journalist would get to speak before the head of state. And I really mean that. I mean, this is one of the big advantages Estonia has, is a non-hierarchical approach to doing business with other people. It doesn't seem odd to you. I simply can't imagine being on a panel with Václav Klaus and being allowed to speak before him. In fact, he would speak for the entire 59 minutes of the session, and we would listen, and that would be the way he would do it. No offense to him, that's just the way he does it. I just want to say a couple of words about the international context before we get on to the discussion about Estonia. You mentioned I cover 22 countries. There are 2 points I would bring up from that. One is, there is no magic recipe. I was a bit surprised to hear in the previous panel people talking about a better relationship with Russia, as if this would be the answer to Estonia's problems. I go to Moldova a lot. I go to Bulgaria a lot. I go to Latvia a lot. I don't think that the policies of accommodation and appeasement which they have followed with regard to Russia over the last 10 or 15 years have made those countries richer. They've not improved their geopolitical status. They've not improved their energy security. There may be good reasons for doing business with Russia, but it's not a magic solution to Estonia's problems, if geography and history are any guide. And the second point I'd make is that this is not so bad. It may feel very bad here, but in the wider perspective of the way people look at post-communist Europe, Estonia still counts as a success story. It is by far the most successful of the, what are sometimes called the 15 former Soviet republics. I would always say 12 former Soviet republics and 3 occupied territories, but that's just me being pernickety. But it is the most successful country in the ex-Soviet space, and it's one of really 2 or 3 in the whole post-communist space, which is still seen as a success story. As someone who knows Estonia quite well, I would say this is partly a tribute to Estonia's natural ability to do PR and doesn't always reflect reality. But the fact is you have not lost the good image that you acquired over the past 15 to 20 years. My final point, before I hand over to Toomas, Hendrik, Ilves, is on, just very briefly, to the future. I always remember when I came here in 1991 to work on what was then the Baltic Independent. And we had a couple of Estonians there who spoke really excellent English. And we had some visiting English people who didn't speak such good English. And I remember one of them producing an article, and Tarmo Tamak, who was then the editor of the Baltic Independent, saying, well, that may be okay on a local newspaper in England, but it won't do here. It's not up to Estonian standards. And we can talk about what that should mean later on, but I just thought I'd leave you with that to aim for the best in the West and then to at least match it, and if possibly beat it, is the project for the future.
The Estonian case that is reduced to a formula, only the numbers changes, but it's the probability of R is equal to 1 divided by 1,460 minus n, where n is the number of days to the next election. That is to say, the probability of a reform is 1 on the day after the election, and the probability of reform decreases as you approach election day. This is something we have, but it's a problem everywhere where there's a genuine democracy, be it the United States, Germany, Italy. You are a victim of the political cycle, and this is one of the problems that we have here. Why can't we do something now? Well, it's because people are already thinking about the next election. And a number of talks this morning talked about the problem of the election cycle. But that's a problem every country faces if it's democratic. The second thing, which I think is fairly unique to Estonia, I don't know why, perhaps Marju Lauristin can say why it is, but we are a project-based society. We solve issues through wholesale mobilization, social, political, and economic mobilization. Everyone gets behind a project. The project in the beginning of the 20th century was Estonian language secondary education. The project, or in the 19th century, it was even having an Estonian language school, the Alexander School, but that failed. We had the War of Independence, when we all of us reestablished independence. When it came to Russian troop withdrawals, that was the next project. Joining the European Union, joining NATO was a massive project that we all wanted to do. And we achieved those things. I mean, let's face it, all of those issues actually had a very low probability when we began. Estonian independence the first time around, Estonian independence the second time around. Joining the EU was considered completely out of the question for almost everybody, because we were second or third tier countries. This is followed inevitably in Estonia by what Peggy Lee sang in a terrible country music song, Is That All There Is? Which is that after having accomplished our goal, we say, is this the kind of Estonia we wanted? Is this the kind of EU we wanted? Which is what happens after you have a wholesale mobilization and you actually accomplish something. And I'm saying this is what we are amidst again with the euro. We have everyone is invested in getting the euro one way or another, either through difficult political decisions that will cost you an election, or through losing your job or having a lower salary. And we will see, whenever the euro comes, is this the kind of euro we wanted? But what is missing is that we don't actually do long-term policy planning. We do not think, and this was pointed out in the morning as well, we do not think beyond the 4-year cycle, but unless something is capable, we can turn into a wide-scale, social mobilized project, it doesn't happen. We don't come around it. If we don't have that one idea we can do, which we call either the EU or independence or the euro, it doesn't happen and we don't plan ahead. But the problems that we have been discussing here all day are all problems that require more planning and a longer-term perspective than a 4-year election cycle, but which are not amenable to a broad mobilization. Now we will accomplish this. And I would end at the first section here, or the first question, by saying I think the problem might even be linguistic. Those of you know about linguistics, there was a man named Benjamin Lee Whorf who said that language determines the way we think. And I would ask you, if that's true, then how do you translate into Estonian the next English language sentence which a member of the IMF said to me about another country and its economic difficulties? And he said about that other country, if it fails, it will be a failure of politics, not of policy. Now, how do you translate that into Estonian? We do not distinguish between policy and politics. It's one word, and the fact that it is one word means that we think of policy, which should be a long-term, we can use the plural, but that's not very good, is it? Non-recognition policy was something that the United States followed regarding the Baltic countries, regardless of huge changes in the political realm. Policy is something that continues over time. It's a way of doing something. It's a set of responses to problems that may come up. Politics is, okay, we have elections coming up, let's change this. I want to get reelected, we'll change that. And we need to think in terms of policy much more.